She stood in the hallway shadows, phone pressed to her ear, and Lars Peterson heard the laughter first, that crystalline sound he'd fallen for 3 years ago at a Copenhagen charity gala. But now, at 4:47 a.m. on a February morning so cold the windows wore frost like lace, Isabella's voice carried venom instead of warmth. "He's just my personal ATM," she whispered, her Danish accent sharpening each syllable. "The pathetic man works 5 jobs and still thinks I love him." Lars's hand froze on the apartment door handle, his warehouse supervisor uniform smelling of diesel and exhaustion. Through the gap, he watched his wife pace their living room, her silk robe, Euro 340. He'd seen the Amsterdam shipping receipt, catching lamplight. Her next words carved trenches through his chest. "Another 15,000 euros hidden at my sister's in the Netherlands. Marcus doesn't suspect a thing about the new bags." She paused, listening, then laughed again. 90-hour weeks have made him too tired to notice anything. The 38-year-old man backed silently into the stairwell, his throat closing. 5 jobs. Warehouse supervisor at Maersk Logistics from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., data entry at a Norrebro coffee shop until 5 p.m., rideshare driving through Copenhagen's rush hour until midnight, freelance graphic design squeezed between fares, weekend mall security shifts in Fisketorvet. 90 hours weekly for 3 years. Every krone funneled toward erasing Isabella's 127,000 euros debt, the shopping addiction she'd sworn was under control before their wedding. He'd paid 73,000 euros already, his body a map of fatigue, his dreams replaced by spreadsheets tracking which the creditors screamed loudest. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to our channel where real stories carry real lessons. If this tale touches your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe to join our family, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us keep these important conversations alive. Now, let's continue Lars's journey. Their romance had sparked with Copenhagen magic, meeting at a Vesterbro fundraiser 18 months before the wedding. Her volunteering with such passion, he'd never questioned why court-ordered community service for shoplifting looked like charity work. Isabella had moved from Dublin to Denmark for love, her Irish accent wrapping around his heart like warm honey. She'd painted dreams of their future. Children, a summer cottage on Bornholm Island, growing old watching sunset over the Sound. He'd believed every word because his parents had taught him that marriage meant weathering storms together, that vows weren't conditional on convenience. The debt bomb detonated 3 weeks post-honeymoon. 127,000 euros across 14 credit cards, luxury retailers from Milan to Munich, all accumulated before their vows. Isabella had cried, promised reform, attended 1 counseling session, then bought a 1,200 euro leather bag shipped circuitously through the Netherlands to avoid his notice. Lars remembered the exact moment he'd chosen sacrifice over separation, his father's voice echoing through memory. "Honor isn't about easy days, son. It's about standing when storms howl." So he'd stood, added jobs, calculated that 5 income streams could erase her mistakes in 4 years. He'd build their foundation with his own hands if necessary. But foundations required truth, and Isabella's Instagram revealed cracks. Photos of Swedish spa weekends while claiming just grabbed fast food. Dinners at Noma's competitors when she'd texted about eating leftovers. Her sister's Amsterdam apartment, where packages arrived bi-weekly, contents never discussed. Lars had started documenting 6 months ago, 3 folders hidden in his desk at work. Folder 1 contained bank transfers showing every payment to her creditors. Folder 2 held social media screenshots with timestamps and geolocation data. Folder 3, the most damaging, listed 3 unauthorized credit cards opened using his name and salary information, applications bearing forged signatures. Attorney Freya Nielsen, Copenhagen's sharpest divorce lawyer, her office near Christiansborg Palace, had reviewed everything last week. Denmark's community property laws typically split assets 50-50, she'd explained, her gray eyes scanning documents with surgical precision. But fraud changes calculations. These forged applications, the hidden debt accumulation, her misrepresentation before marriage, we can argue for reimbursement of funds obtained through deception. You have ironclad documentation. She'd scheduled papers for service in 72 hours. Lars had nodded. his exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning in ice water. Now, standing in the cold stairwell listening to his wife mock his devotion, Lars pulled out his phone and recorded. Her voice drifted through the door gap. "I'll keep milking him until the well runs dry, then find someone richer. He's too honorable to leave. That's what makes him perfect." The call ended, her footsteps retreating toward their bedroom, and Lars stood motionless in the pre-dawn darkness. His Harley-Davidson calendar, a dream deferred 3 years for her debt, hung on the stairwell wall, February's motorcycle gleaming in alpine snow. Someday, he thought. Someday I'll ride away from this. He waited 30 minutes, then entered the apartment quietly. Isabella pretended sleep, her phone face down on the nightstand. Lars showered, dressed for the warehouse, and left without breakfast. The morning shift passed in mechanical repetition, scanning pallets, directing forklifts, drinking coffee that tasted like ashes. At lunch, he texted attorney Freya. "Overheard everything. Have recording. Move forward immediately." Her reply came within minutes. "Excellent. This strengthens our case considerably. Papers served tomorrow at 3 p.m. Be ready." The city's winter light felt different that afternoon. Sharper, clearer, as though betrayal had burned fog from his vision. Lars worked his data entry shift with unusual focus, drove passengers through Copenhagen's glittering streets with renewed purpose, designed a corporate logo at 11 p.m. with steady hands. At midnight, heading home through neighborhoods where honest people slept, he finally understood. Documentation wasn't revenge. It was self-respect. And justice, when backed by truth, wasn't cruelty. It was liberation. She'd worn emerald that night at the Vesterbro fundraiser, the color catching Copenhagen's autumn lamplight like captured magic. Lars had been volunteering, serving wine to donors, supporting homeless youth programs. When Isabella glided past, her laugh musical, her Irish accent turning simple comments into poetry. They'd talked for 2 hours about everything. Her Dublin childhood near the Liffey, his Copenhagen roots stretching back 4 generations, shared dreams of building something meaningful. She'd volunteered weekly at the center, she'd said, because giving back mattered. He'd never questioned why someone so polished chose basement community work, never researched the court mandate requiring 200 hours service for retail theft charges. Their courtship had unfolded like a fairy tale. Walks along Nyhavn's colorful facades, weekend trips to Kronborg Castle, late-night conversations in his tiny apartment where she'd praised his work ethic. "You're so steady," Isabella had whispered one December evening, snow falling outside. "Not like the flashy boys back home. You're real." Lars had proposed on the Little Mermaid statue's shore, ring-financed through 3 months of overtime, and she'd cried with what he believed was joy. The wedding came quickly. April ceremony at Frederiksberg Town Hall, 40 guests, her family notably sparse. "They don't travel well," she'd explained, and he'd accepted it, too love-drunk to see evasion. The honeymoon in Iceland had cost him everything saved: Northern Lights tours, Blue Lagoon luxury, Reykjavik's finest restaurants. They'd returned to Copenhagen radiating happiness. And then, 3 weeks later, Isabella had crumbled at their kitchen table. 14 credit cards spread like accusation, statements showing €127,000 across stores Lars couldn't pronounce. Prada Milano, Harrods London, Galleries Lafayette Paris. "It spiraled before we met," she'd sobbed, mascara streaking. "I was lonely in Dublin, shopping filled with emptiness. I didn't know how to stop. But I'm done now, I swear. I just need help clearing this, then we start fresh." Lars had felt the floor tilt beneath him. €127,000. His annual warehouse salary barely touched €48,000. Simple mathematics showed decades of repayment, decades of their future mortgaged to her past. But his parents' marriage had survived his father's business bankruptcy, his mother's cancer, his sister's addiction, 37 years of storms weathered together. "You teach me honor," his father had once said, showing Lars the final debt payment receipt. Marriage isn't abandoning ship when water rises. It's bailing together. So Lars had chosen to bail, calculating that 5 jobs could compress decades into years. That sacrifice now meant freedom later. The jobs accumulated like armor against financial drowning. Warehouse supervisor remained his anchor: steady hours, decent pay, union benefits. Coffee shop data entry added €800 monthly. Mindless work, letting his body rest while fingers typed. Ride-sharing through Uber captured Copenhagen's tourist economy. Euro 1, 200 monthly ferrying visitors between Tivoli Gardens and airport terminals. Freelance graphic design. His art school background finally useful, brought €600 for corporate logos and wedding invitations. Weekend mall security at Fisketorvet Shopping Center, standing 12-hour shifts watching teenagers browse, added €500. Total, €3,800 extra monthly. Every krone directed toward Isabella's creditors, while his own life shrank to work, sleep, work. Isabella had promised change, attended one counseling session with Dr. Hansen on Osterbrogade, then claimed scheduling conflicts prevented returns. Lars worked. She posted Instagram photos, brunch at trendy Nørrebro cafes, yoga classes in Frederiksberg, spa days he'd assumed were budget-friendly until reverse image searches showed Swedish resort watermarks. Just treating myself occasionally, she'd say when questioned. I'm so stressed about managing the debt calls. But creditors always contacted Lars directly, and her stress seemed exclusively expressed through shopping. The Amsterdam connection had emerged accidentally, a misdirected package notification showing her sister's Netherlands address. Lars had called the courier, confused, and the representative had cheerfully listed 17 previous deliveries to that location over 6 months. 17 packages. When confronted, Isabella had shrugged. Anya sometimes orders things for me when Danish shops don't stock certain brands. Sisterly favors, nothing secret. But Anya, reached by Lars during a desperate moment, had sighed heavily. She's been routing designer purchases through me for years, even before you. I'm sorry, I thought you knew. Folder 1 had begun that day. Bank statements highlighted in yellow showing his transfers to creditors, €73,000 paid across 3 years. Every payment documented, dates, amounts, confirmation numbers, remaining balances. Folder 2 grew from screenshots. Isabella at Stockholm's Grand Hotel Spa tagged by friends. Meals at Copenhagen's Geranium restaurant costing €400 per person. Her claims of fast food nights contradicted by photographic evidence timestamped and geotagged. She'd grown careless, or perhaps arrogant, assuming his exhaustion prevented investigation. Folder 3 had formed after a credit monitoring alert. New card applications using his name, address, salary details. 3 cards totaling €22,000 limits. Signatures that resembled his, but carried subtle differences. Fraud charges at luxury retailers. Magasin du Nord, Ilum department store, online Milan boutiques. Lars had contacted banks immediately, filed police reports, and obtained forensic signature analysis from Copenhagen authorities. The applications listed him as co-signer without consent, forgery clear enough for criminal charges though he'd chosen civil proceedings instead. Prosecution means public record, attorney Freya had advised. Divorce court gives you reimbursement without destroying her completely. Your choice. He'd chosen mercy then, though mercy felt increasingly foolish. Isabella's mockery on that pre-dawn phone call, personal ATM, pathetic exhaustion, replayed endlessly. Lars had sacrificed his 30s, his health, his dreams of motorcycle trips through Norway's fjords, and she'd reduced him to machinery. The hidden €15,000 at her sister's represented 6 months of his additional labor, 6 months of midnight drives and weekend security shifts, rendered meaningless by her deception. Attorney Freya Nielsen's office had become Lars's confessional. Denmark's marriage laws assume good faith, she'd explained, reviewing his folders with evident satisfaction. Both parties enter honestly, share burdens equally. But your wife misrepresented her situation, shoplifting record hidden, debt scope minimized, post-marriage fraud ongoing. We argue constructive fraud, marriage obtained through deception, community property rules shouldn't apply. You're entitled to reimbursement for funds paid under false pretenses, plus division of any assets acquired during marriage. The papers arrived at their apartment on a gray March afternoon, delivered by a stern-faced process server while Lars watched from his parked car. Isabella's scream carried through closed windows, her fury vibrating glass. She called immediately, "How dare you? After everything I gave up for you." Lars's voice stayed level. "What did you give up, Isabella? The Dublin job you were fired from for chronic lateness? I have the termination letter your former employer sent when I verified employment." Silence stretched, then the line went dead. She arrived at mediation wearing a victim-like costume, red-rimmed eyes, trembling hands, a black dress suggesting mourning rather than negotiation. The Copenhagen family court mediation room felt sterile, fluorescent lights humming above pale walls, a rectangular table separating Lars from Isabella like a demilitarized zone. Attorney Freya Nielsen sat beside him, 3 folders stacked with military precision, her expression revealing nothing. Isabella's lawyer, a nervous young man named Morton from a budget firm, kept glancing at his client as though regretting acceptance of her case. The mediator, Mrs. Svensson, a woman whose gray bun and reading glasses suggested decades witnessing marital collapse, opened proceedings with practiced calm. We're here to explore settlement possibilities before court involvement. Mrs. Peterson, you filed a counterpetition claiming abandonment and requesting spousal support. Mr. Peterson seeks divorce, debt reimbursement, and division of marital assets. Let's begin with your perspective, Mrs. Peterson. Isabella dabbed her eyes with tissue, her Irish accent thickening with emotion. I gave up everything for this marriage. My Dublin career, my family, my entire life, moved to Denmark for love. And now, after 3 difficult years where we both struggled with debt, I'd honestly disclosed, he's abandoning me without support. I'm terrified. Lars watched her performance with detached fascination, recognizing mannerisms he'd once found endearing now revealed as manipulation. Attorney Freya let the silence stretch before speaking, her voice carrying the temperature of Arctic waters. Mrs. Svensson, my client has documentation contradicting virtually every claim just made. Shall we proceed chronologically? She opened folder 1, sliding bank statements across the table. Mr. Peterson paid €73,000 toward debts his wife characterized as our shared burden during marriage. However, these debts predated their union and were incurred solely by Mrs. Peterson. Furthermore, the debt amount disclosed before marriage, €87,000, proved substantially understated. The actual total exceeded €127,000, with an additional €15,000 discovered hidden at her sister's Netherlands address. Isabella's lawyer leaned forward, scanning documents with growing concern. Morton cleared his throat. My client acknowledges financial difficulties but maintains these were disclosed appropriately given. Freya interrupted smoothly, producing folder 2. Social media evidence contradicts claims of shared sacrifice. While Mr. Peterson worked 90-hour weeks across 5 jobs, Mrs. Peterson frequented luxury establishments. Photographs slid across polished wood, Isabella at Swedish spas, Copenhagen's finest restaurants, shopping trips to German boutiques. Each image carried timestamps, geolocation data, expenditure estimates. These outings occurred while Mrs. Peterson texted her husband claiming fast food or staying home. Deception, not partnership. The mediator's expression shifted subtly, professional neutrality cracking toward disapproval. Isabella's face flushed crimson. Those were rare treats, rewards for managing household stress. Her voice rose, control slipping, and Freya struck again. Folder 3 addresses the most serious allegations, identity fraud. Credit card applications appeared, forensic signature analysis attached, police reports documenting unauthorized use of Mr. Pettersson's information. 3 cards totaling €22,000 in limits, opened without my client's knowledge or consent. Purchases at luxury retailers, bills forwarded to his address, damage to his credit rating. Danish Criminal Code Section 279 defines this as identity fraud, punishable by imprisonment up to 18 months. We've refrained from criminal prosecution, but civil reimbursement is non-negotiable. Morton whispered urgently to Isabella, whose tears had shifted from performative to genuine panic. Mrs. Svensson reviewed documents methodically, her pen making quiet scratching sounds. Finally, she addressed Isabella directly. Mrs. Peterson, these allegations are grave. The forensic analysis shows signature discrepancies. How do you explain applications bearing your husband's name without his authorization? Isabella's response came in fragments. I thought. We were married, shared finances, he knew, or should have known. I needed help. The mediator's patience evaporated. That's not an answer. Did you forge your husband's signature on credit applications? Silence filled the room like suffocating weight. Isabella's lawyer placed a restraining hand on her arm, but she jerked away, composure finally shattering. Yes. Fine, yes. But only because he wouldn't understand. He was so obsessed with paying old debts. He didn't see that maintaining appearances mattered. How could I network, find better opportunities, and wear outdated clothes? I was investing in our future. Her voice cracked on the last word, the absurdity of the justification hanging naked in sterile air. Lars felt something release in his chest, not triumph, but exhausted relief. 3 years he'd questioned himself, wondered if he'd been ungenerous, unsupportive, insufficient. But here, finally, was truth stripped of romantic delusion. Isabella had never loved him. She'd loved his honor, his inability to abandon vows, his willingness to be used. Attorney Freya's voice remained clinical. Mrs. Svensson, we're prepared to proceed to full court proceedings. Denmark's marriage laws permit reimbursement when one party obtains marital benefits through fraud. We're seeking €73,000 return of debt payments, division of any remaining assets, and court costs. Isabella lunged verbally, desperation replacing calculation. You want to destroy me? After I moved countries for you? I could have married wealth in Dublin. Connor O'Brien, the tech investor, wanted me. But I chose you because you seemed kind, stable, safe. The words tumbled out unfiltered, and Lars finally spoke, his voice quiet but steady. You chose me because I was controllable. Kind meant exploitable. Stable meant predictable. Safe meant I'd never leave, no matter how you treated me. Their eyes met across the table, and Isabella's mask crumbled completely. I married you because you're too honorable to leave. That's what made you perfect. The mediator closed her folder with finality. I'm recommending full court proceedings. This mediation has revealed irreconcilable positions and admitted fraud. Mr. Peterson, your attorney will receive the court date within 10 days. Mrs. Peterson, I strongly advise you to seek competent legal counsel and prepare for unfavorable rulings. Morton gathered papers with shaking hands, clearly computing how quickly he could withdraw from the case. Isabella sat frozen, reality penetrating her delusions like winter through inadequate walls. Outside the courthouse, Copenhagen's April afternoon felt reborn. Cherry blossoms drifting past Christiansborg Palace, tourists photographing spring's arrival, life continuing indifferent to personal catastrophe. Attorney Freya lit a cigarette despite health campaigns plastering nearby walls. That was the fastest mediation collapse I've witnessed in 15 years. Her confession about forging signatures, recorded by court stenographer, essentially guarantees your reimbursement claim. Prepare for her to fight viciously in court, but we've already won. Lars nodded, exhaustion and vindication mixing uneasily. I just want this finished. I want my life back. The court date arrived 6 weeks later. Copenhagen City Court's Family Division, Judge Anderson presiding, a woman whose reputation for impatience with deception preceded her. Isabella wore a subdued navy, her new lawyer, expensive, competent, clearly coaching damage control, presenting arguments about marital partnership and shared responsibility. But Freya's evidence spoke louder. Bank records, social media timestamps, forensic signature analysis, the recorded phone call from that pre-dawn morning. Personal ATM. Isabella's voice echoed through courtroom speakers. Too honorable to leave. Judge Anderson's expression could have frozen the sound. The ruling came swift and decisive. Divorce granted on grounds of fraud. Isabella ordered to reimburse Lars €58,000, 80% of paid debts, reduced slightly for theoretical marital benefit from his income. Remaining marital assets, negligible after her spending, divided equally. Court costs assigned to Isabella. Judge Anderson's final statement rang with barely concealed contempt. Marriage requires honesty, partnership, and mutual respect. This union displayed none of those qualities. Mr. Peterson, you're free to rebuild. Mrs. Peterson, consider this expensive education in integrity. She paid in installments, each transfer arriving with bitter punctuality, €9,000 monthly from a Luxembourg bank account. The payments accompanied by no messages, no acknowledgement, just clinical transactions that slowly restored what she'd stolen. Lars had dropped to 3 jobs after the divorce. His body finally permitted healing, his mind gradually releasing the hypervigilance that 90-hour weeks had carved into his nervous system. Therapy with Dr. Hansen helped. Twice weekly sessions where he learned that exhaustion wasn't virtue, that self-sacrifice without reciprocity was self-destruction, that teaching people how to treat you began with treating yourself as worthy of respect. 6 months post-divorce, October's Copenhagen chill painting leaves gold and crimson. Lars returned from his warehouse shift to find an unmarked envelope wedged in his apartment mailbox. Thick cream paper, Vienna postmark, an embossed seal suggesting old-world formality. Inside, letterhead proclaimed Rechtsanwalt Müller and Sohn, Vienna, above German text that his rusty language skills barely parsed. He photographed the document, sent it to a translator friend, and received a callback within an hour. Lars, you need to sit down. This is an inheritance notification. Someone named Baron Heinrich von Salzburg died, and apparently your ex-wife is the sole heir to his estate. The notary is requesting contact information for all parties involved in recent legal proceedings. This is extremely unusual. Baron Heinrich von Salzburg. The name meant nothing to Lars, but Google revealed fragments. Austrian nobility, reclusive financier, died 3 months ago in a Munich private clinic. Obituaries vague about family connections. Lars called attorney Freya immediately, the envelope trembling in his hands. She arrived at his apartment within an hour, reading the Vienna letter with eyebrows climbing steadily. This is Isabella's maternal uncle, her mother's eldest brother. The estate appears substantial, properties across multiple EU countries, investment portfolios, art collections. The notary is conducting due diligence on all heirs, which is standard for estates exceeding certain thresholds. But why contact you? The answer arrived 2 weeks later in a second envelope, this one thicker, accompanied by a video call request from Rechtsanwalt Müller himself. The elderly Austrian attorney appeared on Lars's laptop screen, his office lined with leather-bound law volumes, his English carrying that precise continental formality. Mr. Peterson, thank you for accepting this call. I represent the estate of Baron Heinrich von Salzburg, who passed intestate, without a will, in July. However, he left detailed instructions with our firm regarding distribution of his assets, instructions that carry legal weight under Austrian succession law. Your ex-wife, Isabella O'Reilly, née von Salzburg, is his sole living relative and primary heir to an estate valued at approximately 2.4 million euros. Lars felt reality tilt sideways. 2.4 million euros. While he'd worked himself to collapse paying her debts, Isabella had been heir to millions. Rechtsanwalt Müller continued, his tone suggesting he'd delivered similar speeches before. The Baron's assets include 500,000 euros in Luxembourg banking vaults, Irish properties in Dublin valued at 1 million euros, Finnish forest estates worth 400,000 euros, Swedish technology patents generating 300,000 euro annual licensing, Belgian art collections appraised at 200,000 euros. These were accumulated quietly through shell companies registered across Germany and the Netherlands, a financial structure designed for privacy and tax efficiency. However, he paused significantly. The Baron included a specific fraud clause in his instructions. The clause, Müller explained, had been drafted after Heinrich discovered Isabella's 2019 shoplifting conviction through a private investigator hired when she'd requested emergency funds. The Baron, disgusted by her criminal behavior and subsequent lies, had modified his succession plan. Isabella would inherit fully only if she maintained moral character and financial integrity. Any evidence of fraud, deception in marriage, or exploitation of intimate partners would trigger forfeiture of 90% of the estate to designated Austrian charities. The remaining 10% would cover her basic needs, but the empire would crumble. European Union data sharing laws, Müller continued, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, allow member state court records to be subpoenaed in estate proceedings when fraud is alleged. Your divorce case in Copenhagen, particularly the identity fraud findings and Judge Anderson's ruling, was flagged by our investigative team. Additionally, we received an anonymous tip from someone with detailed knowledge of Ms. O'Reilly's conduct during your marriage. Lars's breath caught. Anonymous tip. Isabella's sister Anya, guilt-ridden about years of complicity? Or perhaps someone else from Isabella's past? Another victim finally finding a voice? The Baron's fraud clause was ironclad. Isabella must reimburse all parties exploited through financial deception, beginning with Lars's €73,000 plus accrued interest calculated at EU legal rates, Euro 95,000 total. Only after documented reimbursement and a 5-year period of demonstrated integrity would she access the full inheritance. Otherwise, liquidation began immediately. Mr. Peterson, Muller said quietly, you have legal standing to file claims against the estate. I'm required to inform you of this right. The Baron's instructions specifically anticipated scenarios like yours. He believed his niece capable of significant harm and wished to prevent her from profiting through deception. Lars ended the call in stunned silence, then immediately contacted Freya. She listened to his explanation with growing delight, her laugh sharp and satisfied. This is poetic justice beyond anything I could have engineered. We file claims through the Brussels Tribunal. EU inheritance law gives you standing as an injured party in her fraud. The estate freezes assets pending resolution, and Isabella has two choices: settle with you fully and immediately, forfeiting her ill-gotten gains, or fight and watch the inheritance dissolve to charity. Either way, she loses. The filing took 3 weeks, Freya coordinating with Muller's Vienna firm to ensure procedural perfection. Denmark froze assets under EU court orders. Ireland began eviction proceedings against tenants in the Dublin properties. Rental income suspended pending resolution. Austria prepared art auctions. The Belgian collections already catalogued for sale. Sweden's patent licensing paused, potential buyers circling. Isabella's €2.4 million empire, hidden throughout their marriage while Lars destroyed his health, crumbled like sandcastles before the tide. Isabella called Lars directly, bypassing lawyers, her voice raw with desperation. Please, I'll give you the €95,000 today. Double it, triple it if you want. Just call off the tribunal claim. Let me have the inheritance. We can both win. Lars's response came quietly, without anger, just exhausted finality. No, Isabella. Justice isn't a negotiation. You taught me that honor makes you exploitable, so I'm done being honorable in the way you defined it. Real honor means standing up for what's right, even when mercy feels easier. The Brussels Tribunal hearing lasted 6 hours. Evidence presented in 3 languages. Isabella's lawyers arguing that the fraud clause violated EU inheritance rights. But Austrian law, combined with documented Copenhagen court findings, formed unassailable foundation. The ruling came down decisively. Isabella forfeited 85% of the estate, Euro 2.04 million, to Austrian charities supporting fraud victims and financial literacy programs. Lars received €200,000 as settlement. His €95,000 reimbursement plus €105,000 in penalties and legal costs. Isabella kept €160,000, enough to restart modestly, but nowhere near the empire she'd hidden. Lars stood in attorney Freya's office when the wire transfer confirmed Copenhagen's November rain streaking windows, and felt not triumph but profound relief. €200,000 couldn't restore 3 lost years, couldn't return his 30s or repair the damage to his body and spirit. But it could fund something meaningful. Within weeks, he established the Peterson Foundation, a Copenhagen nonprofit providing legal assistance and financial counseling to partners exploited through marital fraud. The office opened near Norrport Station, staffed by volunteers who understood that documentation wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Isabella disappeared from social media, her accounts deleted, her whereabouts unknown beyond occasional reports placing her in smaller European cities, living quietly on what remained. Lars occasionally wondered if she'd learned anything, if losing millions taught lessons that losing a marriage hadn't, but mostly he didn't think about her at all. He'd bought the Harley-Davidson finally, a gleaming black and chrome touring bike, and spent weekends riding through Zealand's countryside, wind erasing years of warehouse dust and midnight exhaustion. Dr. Hansen had told him that healing wasn't linear, that some days grief would ambush him unexpectedly, that learning to trust again would take time. Lars had nodded, understanding intellectually what his heart still struggled to accept. But riding through Danish autumn, helping others document their truth through the foundation, rebuilding friendships he'd neglected during his 5-job imprisonment, he felt something shift. Betrayal had built Isabella's empire on lies, and those lies collapsed under the weight of truth. The lesson wasn't about revenge. It was about documentation, boundaries, and teaching people how to treat you by first treating yourself as worthy of respect. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more real-life lessons, share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't measured by what they endure, and comment below with your thoughts. You've got this, beautiful souls. Justice might arrive slowly, but truth is patient, and you deserve better than being someone's ATM. Remember, honor isn't about being used. It's about standing up for yourself with dignity.